Is how well your lungs are until you can measure it. Look, you can tell your doctor, hey, I feel breathless, but what they really need to know is how well your lungs are actually working. They need numbers, they need data, a baseline. And that's where these special tests come in. They take us out of the realm of I feel like and into the world of hard evidence. Okay, so how do we get that data? Well, the main tool in any lung specialist's toolkit is something called a pulmonary function test. You'll hear it called a PFT for short. So what in the world are PFTs? Basically, they're a whole series of tests that are totally non-invasive. That means no needles, nothing gets inserted, you're really just breathing. They measure how you breathe to figure out how well your lungs are working. And here's the key part. They quantify it. They put a number on it so doctors can see just how severe any potential issue might be. These tests are trying to answer three really big questions. First up is something called spirometry. This is all about flow. How much air can you push out and how fast can you do it? Kind of like checking the horsepower of an engine. The second is lung volumes. This is about capacity. Simple as that. How big is your fuel tank? And third, we've got gas transfer. This checks your efficiency. How good are your lungs at getting that precious oxygen from the air into your blood?
Now, getting all these numbers is just step one. Understanding what they mean, well, that's the real trick. And that is why this new global rulebook is such a game changer. Having a universal standard is way more important than you might think.
I mean, just think about it for a second. What if a doctor in Boston reads your results one way and a doctor in Los Angeles reads them a completely different way? That could lead to total confusion, maybe even a misdiagnosis or the wrong treatment. So to make sure every single patient gets the absolute best care, and to make sure that scientists can compare research from all over the world, everybody needs to be on the same page, reading from the exact same playbook. And that playbook just got a massive update. For a long time, doctors were using guidelines that came out way back in 2005. But, science never stops. So in 2022, two of the biggest players in this field, the European Respiratory Society and the American Thoracic Society, they dropped a huge new technical standard. We're talking about almost 20 years of new science packed into this thing, giving us a much better handle on different groups of people and using way more advanced tech. Okay, so what does this all mean for you? It's simple, really. A global standard means that when you get a lung test, your results are going to be interpreted with the latest and greatest science. It doesn't matter if you're in New York, London, or Tokyo. It guarantees a consistent and, more importantly, an accurate look at your health. All right, we've got the tests, we've got the new rulebook. Now for the fun part. Let's pull back the curtain and see how doctors actually decode these results. How do you turn a bunch of raw numbers into a clear story about what's going on inside your lungs? So, the very first thing is context. Your results don't just float in space. They're not judged in a vacuum. Nope, they're compared to what we call a reference population. A good way to think about it is like a police lineup, but with a whole bunch of healthy people who are the same age, height, and sex as you. The big question is, are your lungs working the way we'd expect them to for someone with your exact profile? And these new guidelines give doctors a super clear 5-step process to follow. Step 1, compare your results to that healthy lineup. Step 2, see if there's a specific pattern of a problem. Step 3, figure out how bad it is. Is it mild, moderate, or severe? Step 4, check how you respond to a bronchodilator. That's a medicine that helps open up your airways. And last but not least, step 5, keep an eye on how things change over time. It's just a really solid, logical system. Let's zoom in on that identifying a pattern part, because it's super important. There are basically two main types of problems they're looking for. The first is called an obstructive impairment. That just means you have trouble getting air out. Your airways might be narrowed like an asthma. Imagine trying to blow air out through a tiny little coffee stirrer. That's the idea. The other kind is a restrictive impairment. That's the opposite problem. You have trouble getting enough air in. Your lungs just can't fully expand. Think about trying to take a really deep breath while wearing a super tight vest. Just being able to tell the difference between these two is a massive step towards getting the right diagnosis. But, just like with everything in medicine, the numbers are only part of the story. They don't tell you everything. So for our last section, let's talk about what happens beyond the data and why a doctor's own expertise is absolutely irreplaceable. There's this one line from the new 2022 standard that I think says it all. It says that reading these tests is not just a math problem. It requires clinical expertise and consideration of the individual. What does that really mean? It means a doctor's judgment, their experience, their intuition, it's all essential. And really, if you remember one thing, it should be this. These PFTs are an amazingly powerful tool. They really are. but they don't spit out a final diagnosis all on their own. They're just one important piece of a much bigger, more complex puzzle. Your doctor is the one who puts it all together. The test results, your medical history, a physical exam, all of it, to see the whole picture of your health and, make the right call. So in the end, your breath is telling a story, a really complex and important one. And the great news is, thanks to these new global standards, doctors everywhere are better equipped than they have ever been to read that story accurately. It's just a good reminder to listen to what your body is telling you and to talk with your doctor.